Racist cop pulls gun on elderly black man. What he didn't know shocks all of Chicago. What happens when a single moment exposes the fault lines of the city? In the heart of Chicago, where the wind carries whispers of hope and pain, a quiet evening shattered into chaos. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the South Side streets hummed with the usual rhythm of life, kids laughing, cars honking, and the distant wail of sirens. But for Samuel Carter, a 73-year-old black man with a lifetime of stories etched into his weathered face, this evening would become a crucible. Samuel walked slowly, his cane tapping the cracked sidewalk, his eyes tracing memories of a neighborhood he'd called home for decades. He was a retired schoolteacher, a man who'd taught generations to dream beyond the concrete and chain-link fences. Tonight, he carried a small bag of groceries, his steps deliberate, his heart heavy with the weight of a world that still judged him by his skin. Across the street, Officer Daniel Hargrove, a young cop with a chip on his shoulder, watched Samuel with narrowed eyes. Hargrove had grown up in a different Chicago, one where fear and stereotypes shaped his badge more than justice. To him, Samuel wasn't a grandfather, a teacher, or a man with a story. He was a suspect, a threat, a shadow in the fading light. Hargrove's radio crackled, reporting a vague description of a suspicious black male in the area. Without hesitation, he stepped from his cruiser, hand on his holster, and called out, "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Samuel froze, his heart pounding. He'd been here before decades ago, as a young man, stopped and searched for no reason other than his existence. "Officer, I'm just heading home," he said, his voice calm but firm, the groceries trembling in his grip. Hargrove didn't listen. His hand tightened on his gun, his voice sharp with authority. "Hands up, now!" The alley seemed to close in, the air electric with tension. Neighbors peeked from windows, some stepping out, phones in hand, capturing the scene. A crowd began to form, murmurs rising like a storm. Samuel raised his hands, his cane falling to the ground with a clatter, his dignity under siege. "Why are you doing this?" Samuel asked, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at his chest. Hargrove's face flushed with anger, his finger twitching near the trigger. "Don't talk back," he barked, stepping closer, his prejudice laid bare. To him, Samuel was every stereotype he'd been taught to fear, every headline he'd read, every warning whispered in the precinct. But what Hargrove didn't know was that Samuel Carter was no ordinary man. He was a civil rights activist in the 60s, a man who'd marched with giants, who'd faced dogs and hoses and never flinched. And he was the grandfather of Jamal Carter, a young journalist whose viral exposés on police misconduct had shaken Chicago's core. Jamal, alerted by a neighbor's text, was already racing to the scene, his camera ready to capture the truth. The crowd grew, their voices rising. "Let him go," a woman shouted. "He's done nothing," a man echoed. Hargrove's eyes darted, his control slipping. He didn't see Samuel's humanity. He saw a threat to his authority. The gun trembled in his hand, the moment teetering on the edge of tragedy. Then, a voice cut through the chaos. "Jamal's. Officer Hargrove, you're on camera," he shouted, holding up his phone, live streaming to thousands. The crowd parted, and Jamal stepped forward, his eyes locked on Samuel. "That's my grandfather. He's a hero, not a criminal." Hargrove froze, the weight of eyes and lenses bearing down. Samuel, still with hands raised, spoke softly, his words carrying the strength of a lifetime. "Son, you don't know me, but I know you. You're scared, but fear doesn't justify this. Put the gun down." The alley fell silent, the city holding its breath. Hargrove's face twisted to anger, shame, and something else flickering in his eyes. Slowly, he lowered his weapon, the crowd exhaling as one. Jamal rushed to Samuel, embracing him, tears streaming. The neighbors cheered, their phones still recording, the truth now undeniable. In the days that followed, Jamal's video spread like wildfire, sparking protests and headlines across Chicago. Hargrove faced suspension, his actions dissected in courtrooms and on airwaves. But more than that, Samuel's story, a quiet strength of a man who'd faced hatred and still chose hope became a beacon. Community forums sprang up, voices long silenced now heard. Samuel spoke at one, his words simple but searing. We don't heal by hating. We heal by seeing each other. Chicago changed that summer, not because one man was spared, but because one moment forced a city to confront its soul. Samuel Carter, with his cane and his courage, reminded everyone that humanity could triumph over prejudice, if only we dared to look. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.